Hello and good evening. This is the Town of Littleton Board of Health meeting for April 12th, 2023. It is 7 p.m. and we'll get started with board discussion on the ID decision support tool related to COVID and other communicable diseases. Matt Wason, how are you this evening?
All right, here we are for this week's update. The primary variant of COVID-19 that is still around is XBB.1.5. It has dipped a little bit. There are a couple, BQ.1.1 is actually kind of the second, but it's still just a minuscule percentage. And then there's a new variant that's been seen in Asia and the UK and Europe that's probably going to start peeking its head up over here at some point. Our 2-week case counts are obviously pretty low, below 10. Again, always a reminder of those are just the cases that are reported through official testing, not any sort of at-home testing. ICU bed access remains below 80%, 73. CDC community level is still low, and our up-to-date vaccination percentage went up about 0.5 point, and so we were at 38.3. I think the message I would give seems like the same message over and over again, but when things are fine, it's easy to kind of just ignore that there's any problem. I've heard lots of people over the past couple of months say that, remember when we had COVID and remember when COVID was a thing. Hopefully that would stay that way, but the best way to prepare to ideally keep it that way would be to still get vaccinated, be up to date on your vaccination so that if any sort of new variant comes through or some wave comes through, we'll all be better protected and the spread will remain minimized. So pretty please still go out and get your vaccinations. 38.3% of our community being updated on vaccination is not what we would like to see. So we'd like to get that number up quite a bit. And then lastly, the wastewater number out of Boston, both those have for the past week or so have been kind of hovering around 200 to 300. So those are really low numbers, which is nice to see, but we'll keep an eye on it. Questions, comments?
Assuming, vaccinations are readily available at various locations and pharmacies and doctor's office, do you think, what do you think the messaging strategy, from town departments should be regarding the vaccinations, so we can get this vaccination rate up, or at least make an attempt to? And does that messaging, should it happen now, just prior to summertime, or does it make more sense to have a stronger message community-wide, closer to the end of the summer when, everybody's sort of returning from there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, like most infectious illnesses, there tend to be more increases in fall and winter months. People get back to school. It's just kind of the life cycle of how those work. Would I want to wait? Yeah, I mean, I think we should plan on doing a big push in the late summer anyways, but we have a long ways to go to get to at least a 60%. And I'd rather we see like an 80% number here for our community. And so I'm not sure if it's one of those ones I just kind of want to sit on and wait for the summer. That's kind of why I say that you never know when the next spike is going to occur. So why not just go get your vaccination now, get it out of the way. Maybe things are a little calm right now before the summer vacation months. But like you said, they're available at doctor's offices, pharmacies. So I don't think they're particularly hard to get right now. But that's not always necessarily going to be the case. So they're available. Probably aren't as many people trying to get in to get them. So do it now. You're covered no matter what happens.
Understood.
In terms of messaging, I'm not sure how best to kind of continue to push it. Like I said, there's a lot of people who just kind of don't want to hear about COVID anymore, and I appreciate that. And I promise I'll say it less if everybody were vaccinated.
Yeah, I think there should be some messaging. I feel it's very important to have the right messaging at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
to the right group of folks. So I think that's something for us to think on. It would be amazing if we were at 80%, if that were our goal, if we we're fully vaccinated rate in town.
Do we have numbers for the last couple of Vax clinics as to how many people came through?
I can get those. I don't have those numbers offhand, but
Because if those clinics are effective and we're seeing good numbers, then maybe it's enough to say, okay, let's make sure we're continuing to do those. If they're not seeing good numbers, then we shouldn't just keep hammering the clinics. We need a better strategy.
right, better messaging strategy to get people there. Okay, I'll find out about those numbers and I'll report back. Kevin Davis, Dan, any questions, comments?
Quick comment is on when the COVID emergency ends in the federal government, the declaration of emergency ends on May 11th. The access to get free COVID tests is also going to end. So I would encourage everyone to go talk to their insurance companies about how to get a hold of free COVID tests. According to everything that I've read, everybody can get up to 8 at-home COVID tests covered. So you should probably go take care of that before May 11th. So if you look at it this way, today is May 12th. So we're a couple days late on this, but if you order now, you'll definitely get them before the end. If you had ordered before April 10th, that means you can order again here right before the end of the thing. So definitely want to go do that. That's all I have on that thought.
Dan Kane, questions, comments?
No, thank you as always to Matt for pulling this together and sharing it with us. From the feet on the ground side, that hospitals are still busy, although they are slightly better than they've been for the last couple months. So part of that is end of flu season and better weather, but still try to stay healthy.
Yes, that's the key. Everybody trying to stay healthy, stay out of the hospital. All right, so it's past 7:05. We have a discussion on 6 Spectacle Pond Road with Seth Donahoe from Dillis and Roy Civil Design Group. Brenda, could you please promote Seth? We'll be discussing the construction of a new sewage disposal system at 6.
I do not see him in, oh, my mistake. Sorry. 1 minute.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm glad I was able to finally join you, so I apologize. I had a snafu in my schedule at your last meeting. But for the record, I'm Seth Donahoe with Dillis and Roy Civil Design Group. I'm here before you tonight about a discussion for 6 Spectacle Pond Road. You guys have discussed this briefly in the past, and I hope to provide some clarification as well as the reason that we're before you for a variance request. If you'd like, I'd be happy to share my screen.
Please.
If you bear with me, I will get that up. Okay, so hopefully what's before you is the plan that we've submitted to the board. This is 6 Spectacle Pond Road, so it's sandwiched between the site that's known as the Stone Yard and the former town dump. Further down the road is the entrance to the current landfill. This is on the far southern side of the site, so about as far away from the landfill portion of the property as you can be. The site has been subject to approvals from the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission for the construction that's shown on this plan. Essentially, it is an office building with garage bays underneath. The septic system is sandwiched up towards Spectacle Pond Road. There is a stormwater management system on the other side of the site. All these pieces of infrastructure meet the required setbacks to the septic system. We initially came before you, we submitted a letter requesting relief from your Regulation 10, and that is because we are in the Aquifer and Water Resource District. Well, we do have a special permit from the Planning Board, the permit granting authority for the Aquifer and Water Resource District to allow the requested design flow that's 1,350 gallons per day. We also do require relief from Regulation 10, which essentially mirrors the relief that we've already gotten. Initially, we submitted this plan without a proposed treatment unit, or nitrogen reduction unit or denitrification unit. And that system required it equated to 9.83 gallons per day per 1,000 square feet. In perspective, the Regulation 10 requires 6 gallons per day per 1,000 square feet of land area. And we were comfortable in submitting that to the board because the site without treatment resulted in a nitrogen concentration that was below drinking water standards. That was 4.48 milligrams per liter. And for comparison, a similar site that has been granted relief from Regulation 10 was Weber Village, which is off of King Street. And with treatment, Weber Village resulted in 5.38 milligrams per liter of nitrogen concentration. So even without treatment, we were below what similar sites have been granted the relief on. But we received feedback from the board. Jack Maloney was before you, and it seemed adamant that the board would like to have a denitrification system incorporated in this site. So we voluntarily have added that treatment unit to the site, and that results in a reduction of nitrogen concentration to 2.73 milligrams per liter. So roughly half of what Weber Village had. The interesting thing is that the site is fairly large. It's 3.15 acres. So if you took your 6 gallons per day, 6 gallons per gallons per day per 1,000 square feet of lot area, calculate that into the lot area. Without the variance, we would be allowed 824 gallons per day for the septic system. The nitrogen loading that's associated with that would be 3.12 milligrams a liter. And that is greater than what we're proposing with the treatment unit. So with the treatment unit, we're at 2.73. So without relief and without the voluntary incorporation of the treatment unit, we would actually be higher than that. So we're respectfully requesting that the board provide us the relief from Regulation 10 so that we could move forward with this plan and put in the voluntary nitrogen reduction system, and that's essentially providing a higher degree of environmental protection. I realize in past conversations related to this, there were some issues related to the proposed temporary well on the site. I think Mr. Gareffi did address a lot of that in his speaking with the board. Essentially, Spectacle Pond Road is under a 5-year pavement cut moratorium. There is adequate public water within the road, except the DPW has said that we cannot access it at this time. And that's the intent of the temporary well. It's exactly that. It's temporary only. And as soon as we have permission to connect to the municipal water service, the applicant will certainly do so. But I think I shared a lot of information on that. If the board has any questions for me at this point, I'd be happy to address those.
Seth, thank you for everything. I'm going to go ahead and read Jim Gareffi's notes on this. He's not able to join us this evening, so I'll go ahead.
No problem.
6 Spectacle Pond Road. Your regulations specify the loading rate for construction within your water resource / aquifer district. The loading rate is 6 gallons per 1,000 square feet of land area. The lot is within the zone 2 of a public water supply and is considered a nitrogen sensitive area. This designation limits the design flow to 440 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet. The proposed design meets the Title V nitrogen loading requirements, 9.83 gallons per day proposed. Title V maximum will be 11 gallons per day per 1,000 square feet of land area. The board has granted variances to this regulation on a couple of sites on King Street, both residential use, and as a condition of the variance, the board required the inclusion of a wastewater treatment tank to pre-treat the wastewater before it was discharged. These locations were not located in Zone 2 of a public water supply. The applicant has provided revised plans that include wastewater treatment tank to provide a cleaner effluent before it's discharged to the ground. The treatment tank must be maintained by a wastewater operator and serviced at least annually. The applicant is proposing a temporary well as a water supply for the site because Spectacle Pond Road has been recently paved after the installation of the new water lines. And I'm told road cuts aren't allowed for 5 years. This property abuts the town's closed landfill, and your local well regulations require a 400-foot offset from the landfill and a well. In addition, there are groundwater monitoring wells around the old landfill, which indicate contaminant in the groundwater. PFAS has been found in the town well field at the end of Spectacle Pond Road. The proposed well appears to be 240 feet from the property line with the landfill site. I'm not sure how far into the town land the actual landfill is located. I do not know if the applicant can get an exception to the prohibition on cutting the road for a connection to the town water supply, but the approval of the proposed well would require determining the offset distance from the proposed well to the landfill boundary and may require the need for a variance if the distance was less than 400. In consideration of the variance, the board could require extensive testing, water treatment equipment if the water quality standards were exceeded, and require the well to be decommissioned once they could connect to the town water supply. We'll go around the board with any questions or comments. We can start with Kevin Davis.
Hello. So I never received the updated drawings. The drawings that I have doesn't have the handicap parking area or anything like that. Previously, one of my comments included the fact that you have a non-pervious item over top of the leaching field. And I didn't see anything addressing that, at least from my minuscule, squinting at the screen.
Well, I'd be happy to address that if it's all right now.
Please.
So we had some back and forth, or I had watched your prior meetings and I was aware of that comment. Well, putting a septic system underneath the pavement is not prohibited. If it's the board's prerogative, the site has sufficient room that we could simply move the trenches that are affected and get them out from underneath the pavement area. It's only the tail end of 2 trenches, so we would be open to reconfiguring that, so that's not an issue on this any longer.
Okay, that would be helpful. The other thing is that I was the one that called up the water department. It's not the water on your plans or prints before, it had said it was the water department that didn't allow it. It is actually the DPW. According to the water department, the water line is all the way across the street, so you would have to trench all the way across the street in our newly paved road. However, they think due to the well report that you guys had received, you might get that emergency grant to hook up to the town water due to the interesting items that are in the water. The total loading of the PFAS on the monitoring well that was right next door to where the closest monitoring well to where your well is upwards approaching 19.2. The state limit is 20. So you're right at that borderline limit for PFAS. There's chromium in the water samples. There's a whole bunch of other fun stuff that's in the water as well. So including some organic solvents and fun stuff like that. The old town dump is essentially on that side of the property. The transfer station, it does not sit on top of the dump. The capped dump is closer to that property line for 6 Spectacle Pond. So I'm very concerned about that well. I know you guys can drill it and test it and do all that kind of good stuff. And I know you can flush the well to make sure that you've got like a lot of water going through it and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm really concerned about that for the occupants once you don't have a good high flush rate of water kind of going through. So that's my concern with that. I know we're only here to look at a couple of those things, but I have concerns.
And I think that's the next step.
Yeah,
is
I'm sure
to see if that well is where it's going to land, and then to actually sample the quality of that well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the second step. So if we just concentrate on the septic system, I would appreciate the move. So that way it's not under the non-porous areas, because I kind of did my research and I thought it was underneath as a no-no.
So we have no problem making that change. And just to clear the air on the well issue, we at this point would desire to connect to town water. We have received a hard no from DPW that said that he's not going to allow the road cut. This project is really an unfortunate timing of events as they entered the permitting process, essentially right as the road was being paved. Had this started earlier, and that's beyond all of our control, even the water department said if they knew, they probably would have put a connection point in for us before that was done. So now we're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place where DPW water has no issue with us connecting. The water is there. It's in the road. There's actually 2 lines in the road.
There's only one. The other line is to balance out to the new water treatment plant that's going across.
Correct. So they have said that the connection point is on the far side of the road,
Right.
which isn't a big deal. We've proposed ways to connect to that, which have received a hard no at this point. So our hands from this end are slightly tied in that there's no way to connect to the water for 5 years. So we essentially need to provide water for the facility.
I think once you do that well testing, you're going to get that emergency relief that Kevin mentioned before, because the feds are going to.
We'd rather get it without drilling the well too. If the board would support us going back to DPW and saying that the Board of Health would prefer a water connection at this site, then we certainly would approach that conversation again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of know what we're going to find if you drill that well, right?
Yeah, seeing how that report that I got from the water department about the well monitoring stuff that was dated January of 2023. So it's only a three-month-old report. And the well that I mentioned in that email was the one that abutted the property line for 6 Spectacle Pond. I didn't care about all the rest of them. I'm only taking the reading of the closest well. And you can see it from the road. If you look down the hill from the road, you can see it's a black pipe sitting right next to your property line.
Yeah, so I guess, so I'm clear on the board's desire here. It would be to drill a well, sample it, and if it came up high in any of the things that we've talked about, then you would support us getting emergency certification to connect to the water supply?
I would.
I would.
I don't know about the rest of the people. We're not voting on that right at the moment, but I'm just telling you how my gut feel is about that.
No, and I'm just being straightforward in that the desire is to connect to the water supply. As far as I've read the regulations, there's really not a prohibition on a private well. You can certainly require additional testing and things like that. And obviously, if there's an issue with it, we don't want users of the building consuming that water. So we're just trying to get to the point where this can be constructed, and it's trying to make everybody happy has kind of ended up in a difficult situation at this point where I believe your board has made very clear what your opinion is, and
making everyone
DPW
happy
has made their opinion very clear.
So tonight, let's stay focused on the variance to regulation 10, because that's really what you need to get approved here.
Yeah, I do appreciate that.
So Dan Kane, do you have any questions or comments regarding the septic system?
Regarding the septic system, no. Again, I think we talked a little bit about having the roadway over that portion of the field, and just as a commercial building as opposed to a residential where you really have less control over the size of the vehicles moving over that field. You know, even simply a fire truck or a ladder truck, you're putting 20 tons of vehicle over that. I'm a little bit more concerned than I would be necessarily in a residential driveway, but we do try to avoid it if we can. But if that's doable, that still meets all the other pieces. That's for the septic system. As long as we have the treatment to minimize nitrogen, I have no other concerns.
Thank you. Matt Wason?
Similarly, I don't really have any question or concern beyond that for the wastewater treatment stuff. I know you want to focus on that, but for the water, I would say we need to take a stronger stance of, I don't necessarily even feel the need to drill a well and test it right now, because we already have data that's adjacent, and I could kind of almost care less what the well looks like right now, because you're talking about a 5-year period where that water is probably not going to be getting better. And I'm actually more concerned. I would say an emergency applies simply because trying to depend upon that for a 5-year period with mandatory regular testing just opens up so many possibilities for a problem. As well as if there then becomes a problem, you're now stuck with either trying to connect to the water line again within the 5 years or putting in substantial water treatment facilities. So I would say
temporary water treatment facilities.
right. Well, but temporary for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't save money because it's a 4-year, system instead of a, 20-year system. You're going to still have to go 100% treatment if you go down that road. So I don't know if it's us having a shared conversation with DPW or, kind of what the best way to move forward with. I guess I just don't want to necessarily say, oh, Mr. Donahoe, just go ahead and drill it and test it and go take that to them. So what's the best next step for everybody involved?
I think if the board has the appetite, to be proponents of, emergency access to town water for this site, then we should have a public hearing on it at our next meeting with Seth, come out with a vote that can be presented to DPW, and that might do it. That's my opinion.
I mean, I would also love to hear from DPW's perspective, because obviously we feel a little one-sided sometimes. So
Maybe we can invite them as well. But right now, does anyone have a motion in regards to the sewage disposal system at 6 Spectacle Pond Road?
I move that per the board discussion to modify the septic field to a location not contained under the roadways there, and the exception for number 10 there, exemption number 10,
Regulation 10.
regulation 10.
I'll second. Motion is second. We'll have a roll call vote. Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Dan Kane,
Dan Kane, yes.
Matt Wason,
yes.
and Kevin Baker votes yes. Thanks, Seth. If you would like to discuss the water, just speak with Brenda and see if we can get you on our April 26th agenda.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your time tonight, and we'll hope to see you on the 26th.
All right. Have a good night.
You as well.
So next we have 7:15 public hearing for 17 Mattawanakie Trail with Kirk Fitzpatrick from Civil Solutions. It'll be a variance request for sewage disposal system upgrade design. Let's see. Brenda, I tried to promote Kirk. I don't know if it's just slow on my end or.
Tried to promote him as well, and it's
All right. Well, Kirk is gone. No, there he is. All right. Hi, Kirk.
Good evening.
Hi. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Yeah, I'm Kirk Fitzpatrick with Civil Solutions, and I'm here on behalf of Whiteacre Properties for the property at 17 Mattawanakie. Be happy to share the plan with you.
Yep, please.
And basically what we have proposed before you is an upgrade for the existing 4-bedroom dwelling. Currently, there's a system off the left side of the house and then a leaching area right behind it in this adjacent area. So we went out and did some testing behind the house, test holes 1 and 2, where we had a water table, a seasonal high water table at 2 feet, and we had observed water table at 30 inches and 36 inches respectively, so we were not able to run the percolation tests. So we took a soil sample, and it came back as a loamy sand. So what we're proposing to do is come out, the pipe actually comes out under the slab. It's a split level house. It comes out under the lower level. But there's actually quite a bit of foundation exposed, so it's not, the tanks won't be too deep. It's coming out to a new 1,500 gallon 2-compartment septic tank. That's going to feed a 1,000 gallon pump chamber, and that's going to pump the liquid up to a field composed of the Geomat leaching system that is proposed to be pressure dosed. So basically, when that pump kicks on, it's going to equally distribute the liquid throughout the entire leach field. At the rear of the property is a wetland associated with Lake Mattawanakie. And as you can see, there's a 50-foot wetland offset, and then the 100-foot wetland offset kind of bisects right behind the house. With the use of the Geomat, it allows us to put the system closer to the house than a typical conventional system. We're holding basically about 7 feet off. We're trying to make the grades work with the existing slab here. The siding goes almost down to the ground. So with a 3-foot reduction, with a reduction from 4 feet to 3 feet with the use of the Geomat, it allows us to make the grading work without directing water back towards the house or keeping water from flowing towards the rear of the property. And also with the Geomat, with it being pressure dosed, it minimizes the amount of fill associated with the system. Typically with the Geomat under pressure dose conditions, the breakout grading is reduced down to 2 feet. We actually give them 4 feet to actually give a little bit of a buffer because not a whole lot. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thanks, Kirk. I'll go ahead and read Jim's comments. 17 Mattawanakie Trail. The existing sewage disposal system for this site has failed a Title V inspection. The applicant has conducted soil testing and a suitable site was found for a replacement system. The lot has challenges, which makes it difficult to design a system in full compliance with Title V and your local regulations. High seasonal water table, small lot, and wetlands. The applicant is looking for relief from Title V to allow the new sewage disposal system to fit on the lot and prevent surface runoff issues for the existing house and or abutting properties. They were requesting a reduction of the offset to groundwater for the leach field 4 feet to 3 feet and use a sieve analysis instead of a perk test to determine the size of the leaching area. The water table was too high to conduct a perk test. The area is served by town water, and the reduction of the groundwater offset will help limit the fill needed for the system and keep it 10 feet off the lot line. This will allow the final grading to divert surface runoff from the abutting properties. I think this is a reasonable design for the site. Kirk, I have one question.
Sure.
Did you decide not to go for the 2-foot groundwater offset because of the treatment needed?
I'd say partially.
Okay.
If the grading had impacted the house, I think we would have considered that, but it worked well with the 3-foot and won't impact the house with a 3-foot. Adding the additional pre-treatment generally adds about $7,000 to $8,000 to the overall cost of the system. So I don't think it's warranted here.
Thanks.
Sure.
Kevin Davis, any questions?
What's the closest distance from the septic field to the slab there in the back corner?
It's about, so this is a 2-foot offset. It's 5 feet. I think I gave him 5.5, just a little bit of room to play.
Is that slab part an inhabited part, or is that not inhabited?
It is not inhabited. It's almost like an attached tool shed.
Got it. Okay.
And actually, it houses their oil tank, which is above grade. It's inside the structure.
Sure. Okay. It was just a question because other
Sure.
times we required a barrier between a livable space or, space that was potentially livable and not. And it's just a question.
Sure.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we have any members of the audience too, just something to remind ourselves.
Yeah, we'll ask for butters.
Yeah.
Dan Kane?
I'm good. That's it.
I don't have any questions this time.
Matt Wason?
Sorry, tell me a little more about the proposed sedimentation and erosion control barrier.
So
Is that-
basically,
Is
Go
that
ahead.
wastewater related or is that just slope and runoff related?
that would be a temporary for construction related to going before Conservation Commission. So basically, prior to any construction, before they do any work, they'll stake a row of siltation fencing and straw wattles around the perimeter of the work.
Got it.
Then the Conservation Commission will be notified. They'll come out and inspect the line. Just, I mean, a project like this generally doesn't take more than 7 to 10 days, but we wouldn't hope they would plan it for, there's a storm event coming, but that's just added protection.
Yeah, that was my only question, other than checking for abutters.
Are there any abutters or anyone with public comment? Please raise your hand now. That's a no. All right, so do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we grant a variance for a 1 foot reduction in groundwater offset for the leaching field using GeoMat system from 4 feet to 3 feet, as well as use of the SIM analysis in place of a perk test.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Dan Kane,
Dan Kane, yes.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and Kevin Baker votes yes. Thanks, Kirk.
Great, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. All right, next we have a public hearing. Talk about PFAS at Beaver Brook. Corey Godfrey from the Littleton Water Department. The board will discuss concerns on PFAS and the monitoring wells. Corey, I'll go ahead and promote you.
Hey everyone,
Hi, Corey.
sorry for the poor lighting in here, but we'll make do. Yeah, thanks for inviting me here tonight to talk about the PFAS that was, I would say, I guess recently discovered in Beaver Brook behind the middle school on Russell Street. I'll give you a quick history of the issue over there. So, as some of you might know, the water department samples about 50 groundwater monitoring wells in the aquifer of our water supply. And we do that pretty much every summer as a proactive measure to identify sources of pollution before they actually make their way to the public water supply. A couple of those monitoring wells are at the middle school on Russell Street. It's about a year and a half ago, a little over a year and a half ago. One of those monitoring wells tested for PFAS slightly above the 20 part per trillion standard. I want to say it was like 28 parts per trillion. So that's a reportable event. It means you need to notify DEP. So we, contacted the school and the consultant that we had been working with on PFAS related issues and together notified DEP about that. At that shortly after that, DEP issued what's called a notice of responsibility, which is sort of just part of that standard process. Whenever they're notified of a source of contamination like that, they issue this notice of responsibility to the property owner, and then there's clear instructions in there as far as what the next step are. And essentially the next steps in this case, as in a lot of cases, is that you do additional sampling to try to determine if the contamination actually originated on your site or potentially migrated from a neighboring site. So for the past year and a half, the school department's been working with that consultant to do that additional sampling. And then in January of this year, just a few months ago, an additional detection of PFAS at elevated levels was found in the surface water. So Beaver Brook runs behind the middle school there. So that one was a little bit higher. It was closer to 80 parts per trillion. And so that's sort of the most recent data that we have. Based on that notification, DEP, just as part of their standard process, issued another notice of responsibility, hence why it's sort of, became public again just recently. So again, next steps are just to do additional sampling, see if obviously that surface water, comes down from somewhere, comes from the south in Littleton. So additional sampling will happen, further upstream on Beaver Brook. Continued sampling will happen on those monitoring wells at the middle school. I do want to emphasize here for anyone who's watching or listening, that's the groundwater at the property, not the drinking water for the middle school. So there's no issue as far as anyone consuming this water. So that's kind of the brief summary of what's happened over the past year and a half. Nothing to be particularly alarmed about. There is, unfortunately, PFAS all over Littleton, as we've found through that sampling of those 50 monitoring wells I mentioned. There's probably 10 or so properties spread around town that have similar situations. Based on our sampling, DEP was notified, and a lot of those commercial properties are going through a similar process of determining the source of the pollution and the extent of it. But our Beaver Brook wells are downstream of the middle school. There's a couple of other commercial properties that are also have PFAS in that general area. So that's sort of the whole reason that we do the sampling, is to identify that contamination before it gets to our wells. Unfortunately, those Beaver Brook wells also do have PFAS in them already, so it's too late to actually, stop that contamination from getting there. Nobody really started sampling for PFAS until about 5 or 6 years ago now, so it's probably been there for quite some time. The levels in those drinking water wells are below the current standard of 20 parts per trillion. You might know that the US EPA, the federal government, recently proposed new drinking water standards that are as low as 4 parts per trillion, which is almost down to like laboratory detection limits. So they're essentially saying no PFAS should be in drinking water whatsoever. Those are not official yet. They probably will be by December of this year, is what everyone's hearing. So we're already moving forward with designing or evaluating treatment options for that. We have a treatment plant there already that's only 9 years old, but we're evaluating options to add additional treatment on to remove the PFAS from there.
All right. Well, we'll go around the board with some questions and comments. Kevin Davis.
Hey, Corey, how's it going? Glad to see you came. Appreciate the time.
Sure.
Yeah, concern I've got is that they, and as many people in town have known, they've started blending the spec pond water over to the Beaver Brook. Is that still happening? Because we got that big pipe running down 119. So that was bring the levels down below the 20.
Yeah, it's actually running from the Beaver Brook wells, which have lower PFAS, the opposite way to Spectacle Pond, which has the higher PFAS. So we've been doing that blending operation for probably 3 years now, I think.
Yeah.
It's almost done because the Whitcomb Ave treatment plant on the other side of town construction's almost complete there. It'll be done in the next couple of months. So by the end of the summer, that plant will be online, and the Spectacle Pond water will be pumped there, treated, all the PFAS will be removed, as well as all the water from the Whitcomb Ave wells will be treated there and all the PFAS removed. And then the next step, like I said, will be jumping over to the Beaver Brook treatment plant and dealing with that.
Oh, okay. So the Beaver Brook has its own treatment plant that's there?
It does. It just doesn't remove PFAS, right?
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. All right. I thought we were taking the water from Beaver Brook and putting it over to the Whitcomb treatment plant.
Yeah, we were, because it had lower levels of PFAS than Spectacle Pond. So it was just getting the levels combined below 20.
Yeah.
But there's still PFAS in there. It's just currently below the standards, but above what the future standards will be. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, the new Whitcomb treatment plant, that's going to take it and eliminate PFAS. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. Should be non-detectable PFAS coming out of there.
Okay. Cool beans. So even though we've detected higher levels and things like that around Russell Street, which are upstream from our well, it's nothing that we're concerned about yet, because it's
not I would say it's no public health concern right now. I mean, there are certain environmental concerns with it, but as far as anyone consuming that water, it's not a concern. There's no private wells in that immediate area. And then, this investigation will continue on upstream until Mass DEP is satisfied that the source of contamination is not coming from that property, and then it'll be somebody else's responsibility to go from there and start sampling on their property.
Yeah. Do we have we figured out where the plume's coming from? Because
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a plume in that particular area. Over in the Spectacle Pond area, there's a couple of potential, what you might call plumes, like really high levels coming down. Over on that side of town, we've not seen anything extremely high. I mean, even 80 parts per trillion. I mean, the number 80 sounds large, but number of parts per trillion is still very low. And it's kind of found all over the place. Everywhere we sample for it, we find some level of it. So it's hard to say right now, but I don't think there's any major source in that general area. Whereas on, like I said, over at Spectacle Pond, there's a few properties in air that have thousands of parts per trillion. So those are more of what you might call a plume.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Dan Kane?
Yeah, I figured I just had two quick things. One, so with Whitcomb Ave's plant coming online hopefully soon, and water being treated from Whitcomb and from Spec Pond, will we lose the Beaver Brook well while we're doing construction for the upgrade of the water treatment plant there?
I'm sure we will for a period of time. It's hard to say right now how long that will be. We do have, probably at least 8 months before that new standard becomes official. So in that period of time, we'll evaluate our options, potentially be able to get some kind of temporary treatment in there sooner than later, and so that we don't have to lose that source of supply. Because as far as designing and constructing a permanent treatment facility, that's probably a 2.5 year process.
That was kind of my question. That yes,
Yeah.
we have the new standard, and the Beaver Brook well can't meet it, and we have no way of getting the water from there to Whitcomb Ave.
Right.
Then we're losing, a significant portion of our water resource. So that's certainly a concern in general for town,
Right.
or you guys than us, but still it's something to think about as we look at potable water as one of our public health requirements. So
Yeah.
I was kind of curious.
Yeah.
Again, outside of my scope, but with the water going from Beaver Brook to Spec Pond now, can you just continue that and feed that water to Whitcomb Ave while you're reconstructing? Or redoing or
It's an option. It's not the most convenient option, but it's an option. So
No, I was just, again, I way outside of my scope. I just kind of thinking out loud, going, that connection is there. Is there a way that maybe keep Beaver Brook online, even if it's a limited capacity for some length of time while that construction occurs? But
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
My only other question is, and this might be more for school department, school committee than for you, but watering of the fields at Russell Street, so like the big track field at Russell Street, the baseball fields, then the middle school's field there on that right side, is that coming from town water or is that coming from wells on site? Do you happen to know?
At Russell Street, it's a combination. I'm not sure which fields get watered with which source, but some of them get watered with town water, and I know at least one of them gets watered with the surface water behind there. So that's a good question. I haven't discussed that with the school recently, so I'll make sure to bring that up with them and make sure they're aware of that.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my only other question. Going, if we have a not contaminated, but a concerning result from a test well, that we have other wells that we're now taking contaminated or PFAS and water with above level of PFAS, and now we're aerosolizing it and as we water the fields and
Right.
have all our kids out there playing on it. Is that a potential concern? Is that something we want to perhaps review the best practice and what other options might be available for the school department to water those fields?
Right. That's a good point.
All right. Nope. That's my only questions. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here tonight.
Sure.
Matt Wason?
Yeah, I think you alluded to it, but how often is are these tested and have they been fine previously and this is an anomaly or a rare test?
The 50 monitoring wells that we test every year, it's annual. But we didn't test any of them for PFAS until just a couple of years ago. Because like I said, 4 years ago, nobody even knew what PFAS was, and now all of a sudden it's a whole big thing. So we added that to our list of contaminants 2 years ago. And so that was the first time we ever tested for it. So it's probably been there for who knows how long, probably years.
Okay, so like the specific test that came in at 80 parts per trillion, that's effectively the first time that's been looked at. So it could have been that for a long time. It's not something that's a dramatic change suddenly.
Right. Yeah. So 2 years ago, it was in the monitoring well, the groundwater, and that was 28 parts per trillion, I think. And then this year we sampled the surface water, the stream flowing behind there. That was the one that was 80 parts per trillion. So that was the highest level we found on the property. But the first time we sampled the stream, so it could have always been that level. We just didn't know.
All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
My only question is, what sort of, piggybacking off Dan's question is, what sort of precautions do we need to take from the PFAS found in the surface water? Especially, who's got access to the surface water, where is it being distributed and used? And is there some messaging that we need to put out in regards to protecting the public health, from said surface water?
Yeah. To my knowledge, irrigating with water with that level of PFAS is not a concern that I'm aware of, although I'm not an expert in that particular area. So I think it's worth probably looking into a little bit and having that conversation. I'm sure we could find a way for them to still be able to irrigate that field, but using town water instead of that surface water. And it's sort of swampy surface water. Like nobody's using it for any other purpose really than the irrigation. So I don't think that there's I can't think of any other potential threat to public health.
What about agriculturally using it to water?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's doing that. I guess there is a farm just downstream from there. I don't know if they use that water or not for irrigation. It's a good question.
There's horse farms that are right there that are downstream from that. I don't know if they're using surface water to do for the horses or watering the exercise yards for the horses. I don't know if they're doing that. The other thing is, I think there is a farmer, maybe it's a flower growing farmer that's right next door to the middle school as you go over the Russell Street Bridge.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, so we might want to reach out to them or find out if they're on town water, just to kind of think about what's going on there. I don't know if they grow veggies to consume, but that might be something to think about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. You have anything else for us, Corey, or is that's pretty much the summary until we know more?
Yeah, that's pretty much all we know for now. So we'll try to keep you updated as we learn more.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to come in. We appreciate it. One thing, let me just ask, is there anyone in the audience who has a question for Corey? Would like to speak with Corey? I think you're off the hook, Corey.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
Have a good night.
You too.
So next we have a public hearing regarding model board health regulations for private wells. We had taken a look at these model regs previously, and I'll go ahead and read Jim's comments. There are not many wells drilled in town as most homes are connected to town water. Your current well regulations date back to late 1980s and could use a review. The DEP model regulations are thorough with regards to permitting, construction, water testing requirement, and boards can adapt the model well regulations as appropriate for their community. There are some requirements in the Section 8 water quality testing requirements section that makes sense from a public health standpoint, but may be difficult to manage / enforce. Number 6, 7, and 10, and the regulations have offset distances that differ from your current regulations. 6, well location and use requirement. You may want to take some time to review the model regulations and make adjustments that are appropriate for Littleton before you adopt them. My comment is that I would like to sit down with Jim and go over our current well regulations that date back to 1980, see how we can bring them forward 50 or so years. And sort of update them that work for the town of Littleton, incorporating some of these model well regulations. So that's sort of the process that I think will be pretty effective and efficient. But I wanted to run around the board and see if you guys had some ideas too. So Kevin Davis, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we address some of our agricultural concerns that we have here in town. Specifically agricultural irrigation wells should be thought of not necessarily as exempt, but not do double testing, because they already have to do testing for the Massachusetts. There's some regulation for the Massachusetts growers or Massachusetts agriculture or whatever. If you have a license, if you're a farm, you have to subscribe to that, and they already do a whole bunch of testing. So I think we need to just make sure that we don't have an overlap with testing. I think all the people that I talked to, as far as the farmer side goes, was good with the regulations, especially since it's looking at nitrates, and E. coli. Both of those would be kind of bad from a health perspective, especially if you're growing carrots. And just kidding. But I also think that maybe what we should do is maybe invite somebody from the Ag Commission to come in when we're talking about these in the future, and have them comment on some of that. The other I think we should, there was another well type. Oh, geothermal wells. We should absolutely exempt geothermal wells from any of these regulations, because geothermal wells are only used for the exchange for heat and stuff like that. And if you're boring a well for that sole purpose of a geothermal heating unit, we should not have these regulations apply to that at all, because you're not exchanging, you're not consuming the water in there, you're not changing the water at all, you're using it as a heat offset. So we should definitely put something in there to exclude geothermal wells.
And we should probably promote the use of those for the environment. Anyway.
Yeah, that's something we should totally, not have to do. A friend of mine, he recently, in another town just south of us, I think it was either Stowe or Hudson, have their well regulations just got updated, and they don't have an exemption for geothermal. So he had to go through the whole testing when he drilled those 5 wells, even though there's not a nary bit of that water is going to come out of it. So he spent something like $4,000 just to get tests done that have absolutely no bearing on it. So
yeah, it was kind of a silly thing.
Yep. That's all my comments.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wrote those notes.
Thank you.
Dan Kane.
Yeah, following on Kevin, that agree, if we can find ways to make sure that we're not duplicating requirements for any of our users, I think that's going to be incredibly valuable. Completely necessarily remove or waiving the requirements for agriculture, I think might be a little bit too aggressive, but certainly if there's testing requirements existing under other regulations,
Specific
making sure that we clarify that, or for these applications, testing as required under
by this.
CMR, whatever the requirement is for the agricultural side of things. So I think that's perfectly reasonable and appropriate. Certainly we want to make sure things are safe, and we all know that water's out there. It's going to get on people, and we want to make sure that it is as safe as possible, but minimize the impact. From a geothermal perspective, I'm hearing what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree with it. I'm not sure if there are any parts that we do want to at least think about, whether that's even offsets from property lines and those things. If there are not, I'm not sure if there are existing requirements for offsets from wetlands or border or property lines or any of those pieces. If we exclude them outright, then have we then therefore excluded them and there's really no requirements? Agreed. We're talking about potable water in this case, or irrigation water. It is different than geothermal, but I'm just not sure if we want to. We just want to make sure, I think, that we're not throwing it out there so now there's no regulation on where you can put in your 5 wells for your heat pump system, that kind of piece. I just want to make sure we don't act on this side and then therefore remove everything for something else. But again, I agree that we don't necessarily need testing and all that for a closed loop system that is never going to be interfacing with any public water supply. I think those are my only 2 pieces. I think certainly the update is good. I think, as always, and with many regulations, particularly for, let's be honest, particularly for the Board of Health, where we have a limited enforcement arm, that this is more challenging. Enforcement is always our challenge. It's really, initial we're pretty good at. We have the ability to say yay or nay and grant a permit. Once things are in place, it's much harder to say you can't use it anymore until you do these things. So, I don't disagree with Jim's comments of, how do you enforceability? Not that it's not enforceable, but it's simply how do you enforce it in a meaningful way? Certainly we can revisit it. I'm not as concerned, I don't think, about.
Could I ask you a question about enforcement?
Sure.
Would it be appropriate to potentially make LWD an agent for the Board of Health in that regard and have them enforce such instances?
I think from an administrative perspective, I don't know what their enforcement powers are now. I don't know if they're an enforcement agency. I mean, obviously we can empower anybody to enforce our regulation, either, town bylaw or our regulation. But I'm not sure if they're an enforcement agency, and I'm not sure if that would be something that we'd want to put on them. At the moment, our enforcement arms or enforcement agents are the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, and with Jim as our agent, but their team as enforcement agents, Chief Pinard and his designees as Littleton Police Department, who I do not see enforcing well use and regulation. Certainly they were reluctant to enforce public health mandates. I can't imagine they're going to really be going out and checking public water supplies. Just a guess. And really that's it. Those are our two enforcement arms. I'm not sure we need another one. I think if Neshoba has the resource and can do it, I think that's probably our most appropriate first line. I'm just not sure if we want to spread that out. Add if LELWD is not already an enforcement agent for something else, I'm not sure why adding something else makes sense for them. Certainly have them as consults of going, if we have questions about water quality stuff, they're our experts. They know better than anybody, probably including even Jim. It's what they do every day. But as far as an agent, I don't think that necessarily makes sense, but that's just my perspective.
Got it. Matt Wason.
So I agree with your plan, Kevin, for you to take the ball and run with it for now. I agree. Me with Jim kind of go over. I would ask maybe a perspective of, let's look at the model regulations and see what Littleton might need in addition or subtraction from that, as opposed to saying, let's just start with what we have and see what we would need to change. Does that make sense? Because I have a feeling the gap is wider. So I would recommend let's start with the model and then figure out where we need to raise the bar or hopefully not ever lower the bar.
Right.
And look at it as a package.
Okay.
The next I would say is we just heard the comment about that, most of town is on town water. How much of the town is on town water?
I mean, probably 90%. I mean, there's a list somewhere.
Dan, do you know? Okay.
I don't know. I did think it was very, very funny that as we started talking about, we don't really have new wells, came out at the same meeting as we were talking about a new well in Spec Pond for a commercial building.
Well,
So we had that same conversation of new wells don't really happen in town, and here's a request for a new well in town in the same meeting, last meeting, the meeting before. So and the meeting before that, I believe we had the issue with a private well on a property who didn't want to connect to town water. That's their right. And then the challenge next door. So I mean, we've seen two private well, not issues, but two private well situations come up before us with an effect on people's ability to move forward, either on their own property or in a broader. So I mean, I think it's enough that we've seen it twice. I mean, this might be the only two in town. We know
there, and early or late last year, we also had properties that were over by the train station, by Route 2, that had like 3 or 4 private wells that went right in next to that new development over where the Christmas tree farm was. So we had those, and so that I know I've approved at least with this
Oh,
board.
on Grimes, you're talking about those guns on Grimes, yeah.
Yeah. There was like 4 of them or 5 of them over on Grimes Road or whatever it was. So I don't think it's 50%. I don't think it's 10%. It's somewhere kind of in that number that there are private wells that exist.
Yeah, LWD's got a list of all of them.
So I kind of asked that because I think as a board of health, we should probably like have it on our list, like Kevin, of our annual report of where are our residents getting their water supply.
Yeah.
And maybe, and I don't have an opinion on this yet because this is just kind of thoughts and it's like maybe there's a direction that we as a board should urge cooperation with LELWD and residents to say, should we be trying to get more people on town water? Should that be a push? Should we be working together with that? I, for one, I can almost hit the new Whitcomb treatment plant with a rock, but I am not on town water. So as a single homeowner, I don't have any power to change that effectively because I'm not a customer of their water and I'm not involved in the planning. So I just throw it out there as like, if there's something that we could say, gosh, we would sure like to see a 10-year plan where that changes by 5%. Like you're saying, Kevin, like, I don't know if it's 10, 20, 30, but is it a number we like, or is it a number that we might want to urge to change? I don't know. I'll throw it out for further discussion at some point. But I think it starts with reports on how many households and businesses do we think are on well water, and how is that number changing every year, which we know we can track obviously through permits and such. And then the other piece that is also kind of further looking is about testing of private wells. I know there was a town recently that was looking to require testing at least at the transfer of property, which intrigued me, having gone through several properties with wells and kind of some surprise that sellers don't know anything about their water and buyers don't necessarily know that they should be looking at their water. I have two new neighbors in the past couple of years on my street who first time on a well, they don't know what to look at. They don't know what to do, both with young children. So I don't know if it's something, like I said, if we start to say, should there be some requirement for testing at least at a sale or some disclosure of what's gone on? And then the other piece for me is, if people are effectively not choosing to be on well water, but are forced to because they have no other option, should we as a board of health be providing some subsidized water testing for them in the long run? I know the PFAS things was one that our community didn't qualify for the free water testing that lots of communities got. I can't remember exactly the rationale, but nobody at Littleton got to get their water tested. So it became everybody's individual responsibility. And I think we could do better at that.
Yeah, I certainly like the idea of setting some goals. I think it'll start with me I know there's a spreadsheet out there of all the private well folks in town. So we get that, and we can, set some goals and talk to LWD about, future plans for expansion of town water. I also do like the idea of, basically a Title V for your well, upon transfer of property. So, sort of what it is, what type of well it is, what type of pump you have, where the line's running and what's in the water. Just so everybody knows.
And I also like the idea of not yearly testing, but some number of years go by, then you should redo another test, because as we found out, things changed pretty dynamically under our feet and we don't even know that,
It's probably, in every 2 year, just like you pump your septic tank. When you pump your septic tank, get your well tested just to make sure that everything's not changing, or if it is changing, know what to do about it.
Yeah. Something like it just needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, I'll go over these things with Jim. We'll compare the regs we have now. Let's see what, compare with the model regs. We'll start with the model regs, and sort of back into it and see what we can do to get some updates in there, and we'll bring it back before the board. It might take a month. It might not be the next meeting, but we'll hopefully get that done in May. So if there's nothing else, we can move on to the 7:45 public hearing for the health director job description. I know it didn't make it in the packet. Matt Wasing, go ahead.
I thought it would, but that's okay.
But we can talk about it because we already went through the health director job description in a previous meeting and it was in the packet.
Yeah.
But essentially, Kevin,
I can also share and show.
yeah, why don't you share it and give a rundown actually of what happened at the PAC meeting and why we are talking about the job description.
Okay, so the job description we voted upon was drafted mostly by Kevin Baker and I with your edits. We approved it. And at the time, we thought that we needed to take that to the select board for approval prior to going to the PAC. But that is not actually the process anymore. That was a year ago. So the new process is create your draft job description, take it to the personnel advisory committee. They review it and use their grading tool to evaluate what level the job is going to come out at. So we had some back and forth prior to that meeting on some suggested edits, and I attended a meeting with them and Michelle, director of HR, and they gave some good feedback for just adding some detail, changing the wording a little bit. But it became more content changes, which at our last meeting, we voted to say I could make those kind of grammatical changes, but we didn't want to, I didn't want to overstep and make any content changes about the board's input. So the PAC has gone through that and they graded it. But I think there were only 2 of the 3 members of the PAC were available for that meeting, I think unexpectedly. And so, Kevin, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've asked to have it go back to the PAC.
Right. We've suggested that we go ahead and update some of the grammatical language in that first section, and maybe a little bit more than grammatical too, which is why we need to talk about it as a board. In that first, the essentials section.
Yeah, it's actually it's midway. It's the bulk of it. It's not kind of the intro stuff. So let me get this zoomed in better, and I will share it.
So yeah, continue on. So we had two folks from the PAC there. We were missing the 3rd member of the committee, and with such a small number of folks on the committee, I feel much more comfortable, if everyone were there. That's why they're on the committee, and I think it would be good to get everybody's input on such an important role.
So this is the section, it's called essential functions. Prior to this is stuff, the purpose, supervision, and job environment. Those are pretty straightforward. Globally, there was some concern about how we described who this person kind of reports to. And the word officially is, let me read it so I don't make a mistake on this, is, sorry. So it should be, I think we're going to say it reports to the town administrator or their designee, but they are directed by the Board of Health. If that language is okay, then we'll use that. And I'm going to double check to make sure similar language is used in like the finance director job description, but I believe that's the guidance that I got. I think our initial draft had kind of, depending on where you read it, said that the position effectively reports to both of those, which is probably a red flag for a candidate because who wants to have the 2 different bosses? So the first bullet point used to actually say reports to the Board of Health. So I just removed that to avoid that confusion. And then the other key piece of feedback was that our essential functions did seem rather vague, a little too high level. So we wanted to add more specifics about some of the areas of work. And so just briefly, the 5 areas of work that we threw in were wastewater, food inspection, our public health nurse and nurses, community outreach, as well as outreach to neighboring communities, right? Kind of two different things. And then the securing funding process. So going after grant money and such like that. So the first couple of bullets are still the same, but we added the 6 bullets here in the middle. The rest is effectively unchanged from what was previously approved.
It's a friendly amendment. It looks like you need to correct insurers to,
Yep.
I'm reading it right now. What's the delta, Dan, between the public health nurse program and the school nurses?
It's so the public health nurse should be tasked with, or is often tasked with, running all clinical aspects of your public health department. So immunization clinics, blood pressure clinics, lead testing, disease monitoring and follow-up. So you get a case of TB, doing that background investigation, contact tracing, all those great COVID things.
Right.
That's kind of those are the big pieces. There's others probably as well, but those kind of the big pieces. It's immunizations, physical exams, and BP clinics, and those kind of things go along with it. And disease monitoring, treatment, and contact tracing or source. 5 cases of salmonella, that falls down to the sanitarian and the public health nurse working in conjunction of figuring out, okay, where they all eat at the same, where are they all eating? Let's go do an inspection. So the public health nurse doing more the what is the common connection between these 5 people who might not be in the same household, and then working with the sanitarian to go, okay, let's see if we can track down these 3 common places and find the source of the contamination or the illness. School nurses, again, most of us, I think, have kids and know the school nurse piece is there's some level of overlap in there. They're doing med management for their students in the building during the school day. They're looking for disease patterns. I get 5 kids walking into my room all with the same cough in the course of a day. Something's going on. It's the canary in the coal mine. It's the school population is lots of people in one place from all over town. The school nurses are often that first folks who recognize something is going on in town before anybody else does, because there's the population they see. But then also working with high risk or high medical need kids for the schools, G-tubes and vents and whatever those pieces of high medical need students who may be in the schools at any given time. So, I mean, there's some overlap. And certainly in some places that both the school nurses and public health nurses fall under the same department. Certainly when I was doing rotations in Manchester, New Hampshire, the school nurses had full clinics. They had NPs come in and they had full health clinics in all their schools. Manchester, New Hampshire is obviously a much different socioeconomic and developmental population, different than ours is in Littleton. But there's plenty of places where there are 2 completely separate folks who will talk together. The school nurses would make a phone call to the health department and say, hey, we've seen 5 kids today with this. Keep your ears open. Or, simply report they've got 5 kids who they swab and have come up COVID positive. They will make that phone call to the health department saying, hey, here's what's going on in the school department. It's not in your court, but it's in your court as well of keeping an eye on it. So I don't necessarily, my personal feeling is I'm not necessarily sure I see the school nurses falling under the Department of Health in the short to medium term. I don't think with our population, we're small enough. Could it? Sure. But I don't necessarily see it as being, as long as there's that working relationship between the 2 groups, I don't necessarily see it being critical. So if that were to come out.
And yeah, I wasn't trying to imply that they were combined. It was that calling out. I wanted to make sure we called out that there's an expectation that this person stays connected to the school nurse group.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm going to add the disease monitoring because I think that's a large category that you mentioned.
I would change totally. I have no problem with that. I would change, instead of saying implement vaccination clinics, I would implement health clinics, and then parenthetically, e.g. vaccine, blood pressure, comma, etc., sort of kind of thing. So instead of just vaccination clinics, make it health clinics that also,
I can change it to health clinics. I have heard the feedback that providing examples to that level of detail is not usually recommended.
then
But I'm happy to change vaccination to health.
Yep,
that's okay.
Health clinics or health outreach activities or something like that, maybe, or yeah.
Yeah. Health outreach.
I think health.
I actually like health outreach activities because it's whatever.
Yeah, it's wordsmithing. It's not. I think we all know what the point is, and most public health nurses or health departments know what the nursing staff should be doing. So,
Roger that.
Good.
What's the blue underline down at the bottom there for general public? I'm just curious. Okay, whatever. As opposed to the private public. Okay. Or the specific public. Yeah, I'm fairly good. I'm glad to see the empowerment still stayed in there. I'm really was looking for that as soon as you said that things changed in there. So
Oh yeah, as I said, I provided feedback for all of the content changes and our rationale for why we were declining to adopt those changes.
yeah, so generally the other thing that I like to do is a red line delta between the original document that we passed and now this one that we have coming forward. I'd love to see that red line change delta. I don't need to see it to do a vote today because I'm, taking you at your word that this is, these are the changes, yada, yada, yada. But that's just something that in the future, I would like to see that I don't need for it tonight. Don't need it for tonight.
Because this is stored on the town OneDrive system, the versioning is all intact. So you can go at any point and compare prior versions.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm all good.
I can see if there's an easy way to provide an output that I could send to you.
Yeah.
Matt, I'm sorry. I'm going to jump. I hope you don't mind. I'm jumping back in. The last lines on our screen right now coordinates emergency preparedness planning. We want to probably clarify that the fire chief is the designated emergency management officer for the town of Littleton. So coordinates emergency preparedness planning for the town with the fire department. That probably want to clarify it cooperates or contributes, something like that. Basically, it is that this role is really supporting the fire chief as the emergency management officer with emergency plans and drills and those things. Basically, is subject matter expert and resource rather than being the point person for creating and drill emergency plans, because that falls under the EMO. That falls under the fire chief's regulatory authority as the EMO. So
yeah. So supports.
Yeah, I think I think we can leave everything else there. That it basically just clarifies it. It reads a little bit like they're the EMO, we just don't want to create confusion, and it is a different role. So.
Scroll down a little bit, please. Or is that it?
Well, we're now going into sections that haven't changed at all. So
Okay. Yeah.
if you want to keep reviewing, I'm happy.
No, that's fine.
But perhaps this alone makes me feel like we should get this back out to this group for email review, any last changes, and then we do another vote on it at our next meeting.
I mean, I'm fine with those grammatical changes we just made.
There was one more blue underlined above. I'm just picking up what Microsoft Word said. Hey, you got to think about this. I think it was an affect versus effect. You scroll up a little bit. Yeah. And as you can see, English was my major.
Okay, then what step do you want to take right now, Kevin?
I'll make a motion to accept the changes as presented, as
Okay.
discussed.
Second,
Motion and a second, roll call vote. Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane,
Dan Kane, yes.
Matt Wason,
Always, yes.
and Kevin Baker votes yes. So I think next steps are to send it back over to Michelle. Now that we have what we want to send them, and then we'll get another meeting on the books. And Michelle might have some input as far as, number of characters in certain sections, because she has to upload it to an online template somewhere type of thing. But I'd love to get another date on the books with the PAC. And then after that's graded, we'll be able to go to the select board, and I'm sure the PAC will present the grading. And should it come out at a half of a grade, we'll have to go there and sort of make the case for why it needs to be rounded up or rounded down, and figure it out for there. So thanks for getting that done, and we will now move on to our 7:55 public hearing for Neshoba Associated Boards of Health. Littleton Board of Health will vote on whether to re-sign with the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health. And we have to vote because this will be a part of the town warrant coming up at town meeting. We will all vote on this because we voted to withdraw in 2021, and we are not quite ready. We still need to have be able to provide the sanitarian services and the public nursing services for the residents. And as everyone here knows, we have not yet even finalized we've finalized the job description. It has not yet been graded. It's still going to take some time. So we do need to have some services in place for residents as we go through this process of hiring our health director. So we did receive, I'm sure everyone saw that communication. We saw a letter of support from the town planner in regards to joining back with Neshoba. I'd like to pass it around the board for questions and comments at this point.
I don't recall seeing that letter. I'm sorry.
No, I think it came in today. I can read it for you guys.
I do think our town planner is in the audience, though.
Oh. Maren, are you listening? All right. Here she is, promoting.
Okay, sorry about that. Too many buttons on a tablet.
Good evening. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
I had emailed you and Matt just offering support for the process.
Thank you. Yeah, we know it's the voters will be looking for some direction from the Board of Health in regards to whether or not to vote for this article. It's important. It's essential that we have some folks in place. That's not to say we couldn't contract out some services for different vendors, sanitarians, visiting nurses, etc., to cover us while we are on this journey of finalizing the job description, getting it graded, and putting it out there to find a health director. There are a bunch of different ways we could go. I think re-signing with Neshoba is the path of least resistance. I think Jim has been great for this community, and I think he's a good guy to have working for us as we bring on a new hire and a health director, so that they can work together, and he can really sort of gather some knowledge about Littleton's inner workings that otherwise may not be available to a new health director. So I was going to ask the board members for comments and questions, and then we can see what we want to do. Matt,
I guess I can also
yeah,
provide the update because Dan Kane and I attended the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health board meeting last week, along with Ryan Ferreira, the town administrator, and it was a good discussion. I think some members of the Neshoba board were concerned that we were kind of flip-flopping a little bit, saying we were going to leave and then saying we weren't going to leave and saying we're going to leave again and saying we're not going to leave. At the end of it, they passed a motion to allow us to join the board. Again, as to whether we didn't ever left or not, I don't know if it matters, but they said, yes, Littleton can come back into Neshoba Associated Board of Health. So where that leaves us is, as Kevin mentioned, this board has to vote on it, and then the town has to vote on it. And hopefully all those things go in the direction we are recommending, because we don't have a whole lot of plan B at this point for July 1st.
Kevin Davis, any comments, questions?
So did we put together an MOU, or was that vote on the MOU, the standard MOU that came from the Neshoba Boards of Health? So in other words, if we start doing our own inspections, I would assume that we would get the credit of the monies versus heading over to the Neshoba's Boards of Health if they did the inspection, sort of kind of thing.
So from what I've heard, and I don't have firsthand knowledge of this, and I don't have the answer to your question, but I have heard that that would be the case. So when we bring someone on and we start doing plan reviews and we start doing food inspections, those fees would come directly to Littleton.
Okay.
It is a good question. Same thing. We have not heard that directly, but
Right.
Jim supposedly said that that was okay. I have asked Ryan Ferreira to check the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health bylaws to make sure there's nothing in them that says we're going to be disrupting our relationship as we join that health district.
And that's, I don't know if I've ever seen the MOU between the Board of Health and Neshoba, or Neshoba and the town. One exists, I'm sure, right, Myron? Somewhere. It's got to.
That's a very good question. I would presume so.
Okay. I will ask Ryan about that tomorrow and see what it is, where it is, what it says, and see if there's anything else we need to get added in there.
Is this vote required tonight so that it makes it into the packet for everything, or do we have a 2-week delay to blah, 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 so we can see what the MOU is and understand those ramifications?
I think we should probably send a clearer message and vote on it tonight, subject to the approval of an MOU.
I agree. I think we should vote that in principle, this is the direction we want to go, but we need to see the paperwork because it sounds like nobody in this virtual room has ever actually seen it.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. Dan Kane.
No matter what it says, as of July 1st, does it matter? If it says, even if we bring our own agent, we cannot collect the fees for work that our own agent does, as of July 1st, when we have no health department, does it matter what this contract, MOU, whatever the language, the Neshoba bylaws are? Does it matter? I guess is my only question. I agree. I think it'd be clear. We obviously want to see what the relationship is and how it works. We want all those things. But at the end of the day, is delaying this decision to rejoin, does it actually change anything no matter what it says in there? Because otherwise
I think it does, because I think we really need to let it be known that we are establishing our own health department, and our intent is to get this thing up and running as soon as possible and to start to pivot and allow our department to process the paperwork, keep track of the data, to be able to pay for our infrastructure that we're setting up by collecting revenue and fees. Whether they agree to it or not, I don't know, but I think that we have to let our intent be known. And honestly, if push comes to shove, we can hire a sanitarian, contracted sanitarian. We can hire visiting nurses. Town of Littleton only uses a public nurse 2 hours a week, 2 hours a month to run a blood pressure clinic. Like, we don't really have a lot of need there right now. So I think it matters.
And I would say it's not that I would want to review it to set us up to say we reject this. I would say it's much more to make sure we understand the terms that we have and provide us any opportunity to negotiate some change to that. Based upon the meeting that we had the other night, I didn't get the sense that there was shared full understanding of what they ask of their own members. And so I want to get eyeballs on the words on whatever paper it is, as some representatives of their board tried to say that we were going to be required to stay for a certain length of time or required to leave by a certain time. That's the kind of stuff that starts to make me feel uncomfortable. And if we think it's one direction and they think it's another direction, the piece of paper says a third thing. I don't want to get into that situation, I think.
The only thing, well, try this again, Davis. I agree with what Dan is saying in principle. I think it's the right thing. It's not going to matter if we don't have somebody there to go help or do whatever, to help us out and all that kind of good stuff. Come July 1st, or have the person hired come July 1st, we're screwed. So I understand why we need to do it. But as I said, it's that as Matt said, it's that principle. It's like, hey, this is what we're intending to do. This is what it is. And if we go do this, we should be paid for our time, not somebody else has a large sucking sound on the other side. So that's all. But Dan, I'm with you. I hear what you're saying.
So I'd like to make a motion that the Littleton Board of Health gives its support to re-signing with Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, subject to reviewing a memorandum of understanding between the Town of Littleton / Littleton Board of Health and the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane.
Dan Kane, yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And Kevin Baker votes yes. So we will get that MOU as soon as we can, and hopefully pass it around electronically, so we can make some comments on that. And then administrative matters. I didn't see any meeting minutes in the packet. Brenda, where are we with meeting minutes?
There, the meeting minutes that we are to vote on tonight were, from 8:10 and 10:26.
The revised from,
The revised from the ones, from the last meeting, yes.
I don't see them.
they're not in the packet, but we all got them via email.
No, I don't normally add them to the packet.
They have to be in the packet, I think.
When? I see August 1st. That was
1026 was the one with the cut and paste from Gary Archer.
yeah.
And then August 10th.
And I think I replied to you on both of
Yes.
those with one
Yes.
of them had changes and then which is like,
1026 had one change,
Yeah.
and then 810 looks good.
And then the other one, what?
Those are the only
Other
two.
one- Okay, then there was the other one that Dan brought up that we voted on that we needed to change because there was a mistake in.
the Gary Archer one. Yeah, the 1026.
You're on mute, Dan.
I apologize. I was looking
Sure.
at the screen, not paying attention. Looks like April 5th was sent out with the corrections.
April 5th. No, that was the date they were sent out. Okay.
Yeah, no, Kevin was looking for the email with the updated
Got it.
minutes. Looks like that's when it was.
Got it. All right. I'm looking at them now. I thought they, okay. Do a better job, Davis. Do a better job. Okay. I'm good with that. I'm good with him.
The exact dates were August 5th and October 26th, right?
Mhm.
August 10th.
August 10th,
7th, 2022.
yes, 2022.
I'll make a motion to.
Time. Hold on 1 second, sir, before the motion is made.
Yeah.
At the top of the October 26th minutes, it says October 26th, 2023. We're not there yet. Should be 2022.
Brenda, will you make that edit for us?
Yes, I will make the edit.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for August 10th, 2022, as well as the minutes for
Just one at a time. We have to do one at a time.
One at a time. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for August 10th, 2022.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Roll call vote. Kevin Davis,
Abstain. I wasn't present.
Dan Kane,
Abstain, wasn't present.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
Kevin Baker, yes. I don't even know if that counts. All right. I'll make another vote for October to approve the minutes from October 26, 2022
Is that the friendly amendment as amended?
as amended.
I'll give you a second on that one.
Roll call vote. Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane,
Dan Kane, yes.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and Kevin Baker votes yes. We have no other participants in the audience for public comment. Any board member updates, comments, and discussion?
Yeah, Kevin, you asked me to go to that Mass DEP notice
Yes.
for the water. So when I tried to dial into that, the link didn't work. I tried calling, no one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was a bust on Monday, which kind of was a bum because I set aside time out of work, yada yada yada. And
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
it's okay. It's part of the JOB. You just go do and things like that. So
Hopefully, you didn't have to wait around too long. And
I gave it the standard professorial 15-minute wait and then kind of went from there. So
well, thanks for trying.
yeah. And other than that, I have nothing else.
Dan King.
I always have something.
Yeah.
I did share some information earlier today. I attended the Middlesex DA's opiate task force meeting for the quarter this morning, and lots of great information. For those of you who don't know, that federal government has approved Narcan to be sold over the counter. Doesn't have a huge impact here in Massachusetts since we've had standing orders for multiple pharmacies here in Massachusetts, where basically you can walk in, you do not need a prescription, but it is filled as if it's a prescription. Basically, there's a standing prescription for anybody who requests it. The upside of that is that it is generally covered by insurance. As it goes over the counter, insurances will no longer be required to cover it because it is no longer a prescription med, which can potentially, while increasing access since it's over the counter, will potentially decrease access to Narcan because of increased cost. So there is some work being done trying to minimize costs. One of them being there's a House bill and a Senate bill currently in the Mass legislature to add a 1 cent surcharge to all opiate-based medications that goes into a fund to basically subsidize costs and increase the cost here in the Commonwealth. So there are some good things going on. Over-the-counter Narcan probably won't be until late summer or fall as it works its way through all the rest of the processes, but that's out there. For those of you who haven't been paying attention to the news, I believe it was actually today or yesterday, the federal government declared fentanyl cut with xylazine as a public health concern or trending emergency. Xylazine is a veterinary sedative and tranquilizer that has been found by the state drug lab to be in about a third of all of their tested seized drugs in the Commonwealth have been found to contain this veterinary sedative as one of the cutting agents. Problem is it significantly increases risk of death. So while here in Littleton, of course, we have no drug problem and there is no concerns, we're here in Littleton, and if you talk to the police department, we had the largest drug capture ever in Littleton history the other day for a car passing through town. But certainly as a parent of a school-age child, the dinner table conversation is that drugs exist in our town and are regularly utilized by residents of our town. So it is a concern even here in Littleton. So certainly something to be concerned with and think about. The last piece that came out and that I shared is that the opiate settlements have all finally been completed and approved and all that great stuff. At this point, the town of Littleton has gotten, per the Attorney General's office reports, $46,000 and change from the J&J settlement as well as the Generalized Distribution Fund. But there are 5 other, because each of the settlements was individual with the pharmacies or manufacturers, so that for those 5 other settlements, each community, if they want to participate and receive their portion of the funding or the settlement money, needs to be completed by Tuesday the 18th, I think it is, whatever Tuesday is. I simply don't know that I have not seen any of this come before the board, either for how the $46,000 from the J&J and the original distribution funding was utilized, planned on being utilized, community outreach to identify how it was going to be utilized. There are limitations in the agreement of what it can be used for, how it can be used, and it's pretty broad, but it is really around education and mitigation. So it is Narcan availability and teaching, it is treatment expansion, it is education in schools and all the things you would expect to go along with this. But there's lots of options. But one of there are a list of requirements of how it can be utilized. So I just want to make sure, since I'm not sure, I would assume it would be the town administrator's office who'd be signing off on behalf of the town for any settlement participation. I just want to make sure, if we can touch base, that actually happens. The estimated total from those 5 additional settlements, which is Walgreens, Walmart, Teva, Allergan, and CVS, totals almost $176,000 to go towards opiate and drug mitigation, remediation, and treatment. So there's a great resource there. And I certainly, as a Board of Health, as a school department, as a police department, and as a community, that we have lots of opportunities to really identify where are our biggest needs. We're back to where we were a year and a half ago of what are the needs of our community and how do we best meet those needs with the resources we have. We're looking at having a pretty nice little nest egg of opportunities of funding to address some of these concerns we really need to figure out how, as a community, we are going to identify what those needs are, how best to meet them with the resources we have personnel wise, as well as the financial resources that will coming from the settlements. But obviously we don't want that to come and go and never have the town sign off on that we want to participate in these settlements. I'm sure it's already been done, but again, we haven't, I don't believe, unless Kevin or Matt or someone else has heard from the town administrator's office or somebody else, that this has been in the works and we're part of the process and we're on board. So
No, and I'll reach out to Ryan. I'll also reach out to Cindy Napoli, who is, I think, a proponent of the Coalition Against Addiction here in town, and see what the status is.
Dan, do you know when that 46K came through the door?
If you give me 2 minutes, I can pull it back up. It was between July and December of 22. Give or take. Off the
Okay,
I mean,
so
from looking at
recent.
the spreadsheet. Recent. It's been it's been less than a year. But I
Okay.
can give you exact dates because there's a couple different distribution dates, but in
No, but
2022.
the point is all of us were on the board and none of us know about it. That's why I was just, it wasn't a
that
whole thing.
per the Attorney General's office distribution sheet of when the distributions were and what they were for and the amounts and the dates, I believe they were all in second half of 2022.
You're muted, but I'm sure it was very witty.
That would be an amazing chunk of change to get a hold of.
Yeah,
Let's just
actually,
say there's-
speaking with a public health professional the other day, and they actually went out and hired a substance abuse and addiction counselor as a part of their health department with that money to go out and reach out to the community and see how they.
I mean, and for us, that's, that would cover a couple of years of a salary for that one piece. I don't think we necessarily need a full timer or even a part timer of that, but certainly one of the recommendations from the recommended or, what money can be used for is that piece of working as part of a collaborative. So whether that's contributing part of this into Neshoba as our coalition to, okay, you know what,
that
we're going to
might
put
be
in.
why we never heard about it, by the way.
Well, I don't, but the money goes to the community, not to anybody else.
All right.
But that it is community money, not somebody else's money. So we could perhaps, as a community, say, okay, we're going to take, again, just off the top of my head, 10 grand of our settlement money is going to go towards the combined Neshoba opiate outreach program for whatever that is, and Boxborough and Ashburnham. Everybody puts in some little percentage, and now you've got a full-timer hired for the next 5 years out of it, or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
It might be somebody who just went out and bought $46,000 worth of Narcan, and they have a really big box of Narcan in a closet. That also could be, that would meet the requirement, that would meet the allowable use. I just don't know, but that would be certainly interesting of where it is,
We'll
and
figure that out. Yeah.
did it go to the police department and to law enforcement and diversion? I don't know. It would be one of those interesting pieces to see where it went and the recommendation of how it's used. And
I would hope we would have some input on how it went and got used, because I could really see, how you're saying in July or whatever it is, the cost of the medication, or the end of the year, whatever, the cost of the medication in Narcan is going to be going up because it's no longer considered a prescription. This would be one of those ways to maybe offset that cost and say, hey, look, here's my receipt. I bought 4, give me 50% back or something like that off of the cost or whatever it is. And that would, while I appreciate some of the money going towards the police department for whatever use they have, it should not have gone to.
and I'm not saying it did. I just don't
Yeah.
know. It could
Yeah,
be
well-
any place.
It might just be floating out there in cyberspace somewhere. No one knows.
It could just be in the town general fund someplace at the moment as well. So let's see.
Open check.
So for Littleton, we've received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 payments total. Earliest was July 15, 2022. The most recent we had 6 of them in November 2nd, 2022. So second half of 2022 for the entire total.
I'd love that open checkbook. Yay.
Yeah, I will find that out tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Thanks for participating in that.
Nope, no problem. I know Matt and I have talked briefly about this as well. I know he was doing some work that thank you, Kevin, for converting all the PDFs into Excel manipulative files for the activity reports for Littleton for activity done by the Neshoba boards. I think I shared out kind of some of our numbers of times between inspections for our food service inspections. I have requested from Brenda just copies of what we have for hard copies, just to supplement those activity reports. Jim has said those activity reports are like any report, are only as good as the person in the moment writing down what they happen to have done that day. So looking at those reports, we have a number of places in town. So the state requirement for food service inspection is every 6 months. So that every place that serves anything that is temperature sensitive, which is most of the places who are food service establishments, whether that's restaurants or retail establishments, have a 6 month requirement for inspection. Per their activity reports, we have a number of places who aren't quite meeting that 180-day 6 month requirement. So I have requested, and I hope the board doesn't mind, from Brenda, just our hard copies from the Neshoba for those inspection reports, just to make sure we can supplement those. If some of these dates simply weren't on their activity reports, but they were done, they just weren't documented on the activity report, then I can update the list. Once we have that and have data that we feel a little bit more comfortable with, a little bit more reliant upon, I would love to be, if we can put it on the agenda just briefly, so we can just take a look and see where we are. Are we as a community in compliance as we work with Neshoba, working to make sure that as our agent, that they are meeting our regulatory requirements, so that we as a community are meeting our piece. They are our agent doing the job for us as contractors, that we're meeting that requirement. So certainly we've had some concerns in the past. The activity reports were a huge help. I'm hoping that there's a lot of activity that simply wasn't recorded on their day sheets, but once we have some hard copies of the individual reports, we will supplement and have a better idea.
So we couldn't find any hard copies of reports historically.
Because when I talked to Brenda, she said she had some that she'd received paper that were in a file. And then at some point they switched to email copies, and she was going to forward me the emails of what she had. And I'm sure that's a busy office now, but
it was a random 6 month stretch that I had requested at some point, and that's all that we could find. And yes, it was just those reports in a file folder. And then there's a gap between that and whenever they started using this computer based evaluation system, so there's an actual database behind it.
So if you're getting those same PDF reports and they're not searchable, which I'm guessing they are not, send them over to me. I'll be more than happy to combine, concatenate, and make them all searchable, so that you can go through and at least search for the
new ones are a report out of a system, so they are text searchable.
Okay.
It's basically just a printout of the radio button form that you would see on a screen, I'm guessing. So they don't provide necessarily all the information you want to know, and I think it bears further follow-up. So Dan, I appreciate you doing this, because some of the ones I've looked at have been a little confusing, because they might say requires follow-up, but then there's no comment anywhere as to why. And I've been told that sometimes it's just a mistake. So I'm seeing too many mistakes. So I'm glad we're trying to kind of wrap our arms around this, so that we can look at the data and make our recommendation for what has to happen, whether it's fix the data, do a better job inputting the data, do a better job with the inspections. I don't know. So thank you, Dave.
So
no, happy to.
So the other thing too that I was thinking about as I was converting that data to Excel and letting Dan take the lead on this, thank you, Dan, was one of the select board people let me know that apparently on our town website we have a listing of all of the establishments in town, all the businesses in town. Well, when I went there to go look for restaurants, etc., there aren't any listed on the website. So yeah, I don't even know where we would go get that list, because what's supposed to be there isn't there. I'm assuming in the open government database, we would have a listing of all of the restaurants that we have asked for an application for, like a something like that we could go query there and get that list, so that way we at least have a starting point somewhere?
Can say every restaurant or retailer that's selling food has to have a business license, which would be through clerk's office, a common vittler's license, which I believe is out of the selectman's office, the select board's office, excuse me, and a health permit, which comes out of us. So that even if we don't necessarily know, again, Neshoba should be able to, there's so many levels that we are only going to, Neshoba is only going to do inspections on people that say, hey, here's my renewal and I need an inspection, or here's my
Right.
new application and I need an inspection.
Right.
That's the only ones that Neshoba is likely to see. So again, I can't imagine we have anybody operating in town without a license. It's just, there's too much. I can see a good intent mobile food service perhaps coming into town without being licensed, you know, with no malintent, but simply not recognizing that, oh, I have one here, I thought it was good. But I don't see a brick and mortar establishment occurring without having a business license, a vittler's license, and a health inspection license, or a health board inspection permit.
Right.
But yeah, just looking at the list from the activity reports, off the top of my head, it feels, I know that's not data. It feels like there should be more on there. There's a big list, but it feels like for some reason, I feel like there should be more things on this list than are there, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily real, but I don't have anything to go back and be able to cross check. Do I have this one? Do I have that one? Do I have them all?
Right.
Or what may have closed. So again, I went back to 2009, that activity report back to 2019. So you have places certainly that closed for COVID, so may not have renewed their permit. You know, they kept their business license, but they didn't renew all their permits until it was time to reopen and started from scratch. So I kind of ignored a little bit of that data, short of places that we knew that were open through COVID. And, you know, just even with the challenges of COVID, if you're open through COVID, everybody knows you're open through COVID. I shouldn't see a 2-year gap between inspections on an activity report. That's a lot of, I forgot to put it in my day sheet for a year. That's, you know, at least 2 or 3 inspections they forgot to put in a day sheet. That seems possible because COVID was busy for everybody, but it just seems odd. So hopefully we can get some hard copies, at least, even if we ignore that odd time. That's all gone now, right, Matt? COVID's all gone now. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Having just got over it last week. But even like moving forward now that most operations are back to kind of standard, that we can at least look and see with our hard copies and the new computerized versions of at least fill in the blanks and get a better sense. We might be fine. And it's just the data we have just isn't complete right now, but.
All right, yeah, we'll work on getting a full list of all the food service establishments, because we're going to have to get them into OpenGov and get that up and running. So I appreciate you guys keeping an eye on that. Scanning my folders for such a thing right now. I know there's a spreadsheet out there. All right, well, thank you, Dan, for all those comments. Matt, did you have anything before we?
I guess we continue to step towards Department of Health that the town of Littleton is going to have someday. We, in hindsight, probably could have had some pieces in place before now, but this is where we are, and we have a path forward, and we're going to go down it. Obviously, things within Town Hall have changed in the past couple weeks, and it's going to impact us and how we move forward. But we have the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health to partner with, and obviously Jim, who we all love and appreciate. And so it's just going to keep going down that road. And so I hope, I'm sure we've all had some frustrations at time. It's not going to suddenly get easier over the next couple months as the town searches for a town administrator, among other people. But we will continue to move forward, and the future looks bright. So that's all.
Excellent. Well, we don't have Gino tonight for our motion to adjourn, so One of you guys is gonna have to do it.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion in a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane,
Dan Kane, yes.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and Kevin Baker votes yes.